Hello everyone, this is James Shore with another test-driven JavaScript video. I'm recording this on July 12th, 2012, picking up a day later than my last video. And when we left off, we had just gotten sort of our first do-nothing test working. And at the end of that video, I said we were going to come back and look at multiple test frameworks and possibly abstracting it. But, I'm not really sure about that. I think we might be better off going through and getting more of a walking skeleton going. Now, if you're not familiar with the Agile term walking skeleton, the idea is that it's a good idea to prove out your architecture by getting the whole system working from end to end before you start dealing with more features. So you get a very thin vertical slice of the system from client to server to database, the whole thing working before you try to make a breadth of functionality. So there's a lot to learn here about how this application fits together, how all the tools fit together, and I think I'd be better off, getting further along that path before trying to bring in more sophisticated ideas like abstracting out the test framework, which again may not be a good idea. The thing with frameworks is they're very hard to abstract out. Libraries are easy. We could do that in a heartbeat, but framework, it wants to own the world a little bit more. And that's actually one of the reasons I dislike frameworks, is because they kind of lock you in. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Let's just take what we've got now in terms of our tests, run with that for a little bit, and then before we start adding a lot more tests, we can come back to the idea of abstraction. So that's what I want to do next. So let's see, we've chosen a framework for now. So things to do, future ideas, abstract test framework. And I do still need to add that license.txt. I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Back in a moment. Okay, I'm back. So I've got the license in there. I've got it checked in. This is just sort of a standard MIT license. I took out the attribution notice, though. I might put that back in. But okay, so we got that out, done. So as I was saying, I think I'd like to carry on getting the server client, everything sort of hooked together before we worry too much about abstracting the test framework. Now, I've got this working. I don't love the way it's reporting errors. Now, I did have somebody tweet me and mention that they got better error messages by hooking it up to WebStorm, and that's great. But I want the Jake file to be the master tool. Basically, I want anybody to be able to check out this code, build it from Jake without having any IDE installed, and I want to be able to swap out the IDE without having that be a major element of the configuration. It's a convenience, not a piece of critical infrastructure. Because, it's not under my control. It changes very rapidly. Configuring IDEs tends to be kind of a pain in the butt. And people have widely varying opinions about what kind of editors they want to use. Some people might want to use VI. Some people might want to use Emacs. Other people might want to use Aptana for Eclipse. And some people might want to use WebStorm. I don't want to restrict which editor people have to use in order to successfully build and test this thing. So we need the Jake file to really work. And then once that works, we can start bringing in conveniences into WebStorm, but I still want Jake file to be the source. So, well, we've got a basic test working. We don't quite have a Hello World server working yet, but I do think it's time to integrate. So let's go ahead and do that. So we need to, oh, that's interesting. Our test is running after our integrate, which I suspect means we've got some sort of dependency issue, or we've got an asynchronicity issue. Let's see. Integrate depends on default. Default depends on lint and test. Test depends on reporter.run, and I'll bet you that's running asynchronously. Let's so we can't integrate until that's fixed. Yeah. So if we were to fail here, or perhaps maybe it's just as simple as we need to fail. We're not doing a failure in our test. You know, this is the second time I've made that mistake. I did the same thing with lint. Now, if we just do a Jake here, it says it's failed, but the build doesn't fail. Okay, so we need to have the reporter fail when it's done running. Let's go ahead and bring up Firefox. So looked into this a little bit further, and the documentation on how the reporters work is under the confusingly headed writing a test reporter option heading. And what it does is it takes, when we call run, it takes paths, options, and looking at the source code, it looks like this run we're using just sort of figures out if it needs to call run modules or run files for us. Anyway, that calls, takes paths, options, and a callback, which is what we want. So let's see if we can get this to work. So the options need to take a callback, and the callback we want is done. This is called after all the modules are complete. Let's just do a console.log and say tests done. Let's see what happens with that. Undefined server test.js undefined. All right, I'm going to investigate this a little bit more. Back in a moment. There we go. Okay, so we're back on track now. Now, Jake has, because JavaScript is such an, or particularly Node is such an asynchronous tool, Jake has this neat option that you can pass to tasks called async. And if we pass in that async, then it waits until the complete function is called before moving on to the next task. So if we made that false, when we ran Jake integrate, we would see that the tests actually run after our integration logic, such as it is. But if we make this true, then it will run where it's supposed to, which is before. And if we take this out, then it doesn't work properly. It looks like it never continues. It just never moves on to the next task. So that's a bit tricky, but that's kind of the way things are with Node, is you've got to watch out for those things. So it looks like we're on our way to getting the Node unit tests working. The documentation is terrible. It's really bad. But, you know, I found that to be true in a lot of cases. They all want you to run it from the command line, which is fine, but I want to have more control than that. I want to have the programmatic access to it so we can do fun, interesting programmatic things in the future. And also, it needs to be cross-platform and run on Windows. So next time, we're going to continue on, make sure that this fails in make lint fail when tests fail, and then integrate. Now, in particular, what I want to have happen is I want, when the tests fail, I want the build to fail. And we're not there yet. I mean, we've got a list of a lot of failures, but the build itself didn't fail. We didn't see it say the lint failed. I think that's fairly easy though. Jake passes, or not Jake, node unit passes in failures, which is an error object according to my reading of the source code. And I really hate that I have to read the source code in order to figure this out. But according to my reading of the source code, it passes in an error object if we have any failures. So I should be able to say if failures fail, tests failed. There we go. So now if I put this back, now it's working. Okay, good. Stuff is a pain in the butt. That's what you get for working in an immature ecosystem. So let's see, we need to, by which I mean JavaScript and Node and stuff. Jake file now fails if tests fail. Actually, let's state that differently. Let's say build now fails if tests fail. Also runs in tests run in correct order. So there we go. So now let's go ahead and integrate. Get status should be clean. Need to walk over to the integration box. Do our get pull. Here we go. Pow. And then run Jake. And that looks not okay. We got 0 assertions. Let's come back over here. I just realized this is saying 0 assertions as well, but we're getting a check mark here, whereas in Windows we're getting a question mark, probably because Jake is using Unicode. So why are we getting 0 assertions? Especially since we know that those assertions are running. Oh, because we're an earlier test switched that over to use assert rather than test the built-in assertion. All right, let's try that again. So we don't need that. That's failing for the right reasons. There. Okay. So we switched. So that's why we use the integration box. Now, technically it wasn't an issue that was specific to Windows, but it's still helpful to have that double check when you integrate so you have known good build. Now, technically this was working, but I'm happy to get this in before we integrate. So we switched tests back to node unit assertions. So assertion count works. All right. Let's integrate again. So get status is clean. Do get pull, build, and that's good. Now we are getting this question mark, and I'm pretty sure that's just because of the Unicode support. Obviously, Node Unit doesn't handle being on Windows properly. Or maybe it does. What happens if we do an npm update Node Unit? Maybe because I originally installed Node Unit on the Mac, it did some Mac-specific stuff. That is a challenge with having these things checked in directly. Still no good. Let's try uninstalling and reinstalling Node Unit. Nope, that's just a bug in Node Unit, it seems. So, looks like Node Unit's got another issue, which is that it doesn't work properly on Windows. So, Let's get that checked in. I still want to integrate. That's what all this has been about. But I think I'm going to go ahead and integrate, even though it doesn't display the errors properly. It does give us our final OK, so that's good enough. So one more time, git status, git pull, Jake. We're good there. So now we want to git merge master no fast forward log. And it occurred to me, and we need to do this first. It occurred to me overnight that I might not be doing this right. I might need to squash the commits. This is an area where my lack of expertise in Git is going to bite me. I don't think I want to do. So when I looked at GitHub, when I looked at the integration branch on GitHub, it was showing all the check-ins rather than just the integration merges. And I thought maybe that meant that I was doing the merging wrong. And I might be, but it's not. I don't know enough about Git to answer that question, unfortunately. But what I'm doing now seems to be working reasonably well. And again, if you have more expertise in Git than me, please speak up in the comments and let me know what needs to be done. So we just merged, and now we need to check out master. There we go. And if we look at git k, we should see that our recent stuff has been merged in, and it has been. So there we go. And that shows all of our commits. Great. So thanks for watching, everybody. I will catch you next time.